2. Now, on the streets of the second city, I had to figure out my next steps. I was one of the few who liked to occasionally use the city's old name, Chicago, but that was often met with averted gazes and whispers, which I ignored. I slunk through the back streets of River Sector, my worn black ankle boots crunching through the day-old dirty snow. Long abandoned skyscrapers lined the dilapidated avenues, their glassless windows following my every movement like eerie, sightless eyes. The digits on my wrist, an angry poison green just yesterday, had now faded to a muted shade of gray. My mid-length dark brown hair and curtain bangs were disheveled, and my wrist was sensitive to the touch. But I was alive. And yet I was living on borrowed time. For all the GA knew, I should be dead. I willed the tension to leave my body, for relief at this, miracle or anomaly, to wash over me. But it didn't budge. It was lodged in my throat, in my chest, in my limbs. The back of my neck prickled. It was as if my body wasn't my own. My fingers, which had spent so many hours flying across my comp keyboard learning everything about coding from Dad, were cold and stiff. It was a lot to process. I wrapped my black coat tighter around me, watching my shallow breaths materialize in tiny clouds. It was safer to travel through the alleys. I dodged low-hanging wires and jumped over pieces of rubble the size of small boulders with ease. River Sector, often dubbed Concrete City, was one of the poorest sectors in the city. Its bare-bones appearance was heightened as it stood adjacent to Millennium Sector, home to the city's timeless, the wealthiest citizens in the city with long death days. The White Tower, the seat of the GA's government, stood tall to the southwest. Its spire was just visible from my vantage point. I paid little attention to where I was going. My legs moved as if of their own accord. Peeking out from behind the collar of my coat, my eyes scanned the horizon, lingering on a familiar gray chain-link fence. I had, without intending to, walked in the general direction of River Sector School. Toward Lewis. It was risky being here. I should be putting as much distance as possible between myself, Mom, and Lewis. I'd spent the majority of my 16 years at this school. Most of the students were my friends, or at the very least, acquaintances. If I ran into anybody, they would recognize me. Lewis and I had already exchanged our final words. I was putting him in danger by being here, but I couldn't just go off into the city, or worse, beyond the edge, without one last glimpse of my brother. My chest tightened, like a claw wrapping itself around my heart, its sharp talons squeezing the air from my lungs. As I turned a corner, a gleam of white caught my eye in the distance. Safety patrols. They rarely made the rounds in River Sector this early on a weekday. My heartbeat quickened. I let out a sharp breath in an attempt to stay calm. Act natural, Em. I pressed onward, ignoring the gnawing sensation in my stomach that coming here was a mistake. After several long moments, the patrols turned on their heels and disappeared behind a ragged apartment building. My shoulders relaxed a fraction. I picked up the pace and approached the chain-link fence within minutes. The low gray building of River Sector School sat next to a small field of concrete masquerading as a playground. A single tree twisted upward toward the overcast sky. Silhouetted against the signature ruined buildings of River Sector, its bare branches were oddly out of place. The various sector schools had a similar look and feel, with the exception of the White Tower Elite Academy. The academy was reserved for timeless prodigies. Fleeters like me with short death days were often overlooked at school. This led to truanting, arson, or bullying of other fleeters. No one would dare bully a timeless. Behavior like this earned fleeters their less than favorable reputation. So of course the top grades and shadowing placements went to the few timeless who attended the sector school and not the elite academy. In their pristine brogues and crisp shirts they kept their heads down and ignored us. An unwelcome burning sensation erupted in my stomach. I'd never work for the top tech teams at the university like I'd dreamed. Especially not now that I'd survived past my death day. The timeless didn't understand their privilege. The school bell rang, signaling the end of a lesson. Within seconds, students piled out of the school onto the concrete field. I shook my head, dispelling all thoughts of the fleeters and timeless. Narrowing my eyes, I skimmed the crowd for a shock of dark brown hair and a young boyish face, for Lewis. Squinting, I pressed my palms against the rusty chain-link fence and leaned in, the tip of my nose brushing the raw metal. Crisp winter wind swelled around me, slapping my hair against my face. And then I saw him. He shuffled down the front steps with Alma, blowing in his hands against the chill. Even from this distance, I could tell his eyes were red and puffy. My chin trembled and a dull ache settled in the pit of my stomach, my knuckles turning white around the metal. Oh, Lewis. Not in school, dearie. I jumped, stumbling backward and slipping on an icy patch on the concrete. An older woman grabbed my wrist and held me upright, saving me from an ungraceful fall. In the split second that followed, my brain fired the same word over and over again. Deathday, Deathday, Deathday. I thrust my wrist from her grip, way too tight for a woman of her age, and yanked my sleeve down. But it was too late. She had seen.